Hi, this is Ellen from the Chili Dog. I'm making a pair of Caretaker socks, and today I'd like to show you how to do the Japanese or pinned short row heels that I'm using. So at first, this technique is going to look a little intimidating because as you work, you'll end up with a couple dozen locking stitch markers or pins hanging down from your sock heel. But the finished heel is absolutely stunning, and it has this neat and tidy join here up the diagonal of the heel that's well worth the effort. All short row heels can be used either in top down or in toe up socks. For this video, I'm going to be demonstrating on a sock that I'm working from the toe up. So I've worked in rounds to where I'm going to place the heel. So now I'm going to create the heel across half of my total sock stitches at the bottom of the foot. And here's how the short rows are shaped. So I'm going to work back and forth in rows to make the heel, and each row is going to be one stitch shorter than the last row, hence the name short rows. So when the last row is about a third of the total heel width, I'm going to begin shaping the other side of the heel. And this time, each row is going to be one stitch longer than the last until my heel is complete. So Japanese short rows differ from other short row methods because you use stitch markers, a lot of stitch markers to hold certain strands of the yarn. So let me show you what I mean. Before you start knitting, you can lock the stitch markers onto your yarn. And a lot of people prefer to add their stitch markers one at a time as they knit, but I think it's quicker and easier to load them all onto the yarn now. And your pattern will tell you how many turning stitches you should have on each side of your sock or how many rows long the heel is. So my sock is going to have 9 turning stitches on each side of the heel. So it's worked across 18 rows. So I placed 18 stitch markers onto my yarn. Also, I like to alternate the colors of my markers, and it's not just because I'm a little obsessive about my knitting. As you'll soon see, by using these alternating colors, you'll be able to see if you've remembered to pin a stitch at the end of each short row, because all of the blue pins will end up on one side of the heel and all of the pink pins will be on the other side. Now let's start knitting. I'm going to knit all the way across the right side of my heel until I'm one stitch before the end of the heel. Now I'm going to turn my work over slip one stitch from my left needle to my right, and then slide that first marker down my yarn until it's right up against my knitting. So that's my first turning stitch. Now on the wrong side of my heel, I'm going to purl all the way across until one stitch before the end of the heel. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did on the other side. I'm going to turn my work over, slip one stitch from the left needle to the right, and then slide my next pin down to my work so it's snug up against the work. So now that the first 2 markers have been placed, one on the left side and one on the right side, I am going to continue doing the same thing, and things get pretty easy here. You just work across to the marker, turn, slip, and slide, and then do the same going the other direction. Work across, turn, slip, and slide. So I've worked to the marker, and now I'm going to turn, slip, and slide. And work across to the next marker. I reached the next marker, so now it's time to turn, slip one stitch, and slide. And just continue on until all your markers have been placed by working to the pin, turn, slip, and slide. I'm almost halfway done with my sock heel, and you can see all my pins have been placed except one, and the pink ones ended up on one side and the blue ones ended up on the other. So now I'm going to place my last pin by doing one last turn, slip, and slide. So turn, slip, and slide that marker down. And now we're ready to start shaping the second half of the heel, and this is where the real fun begins. So for the second half of the heel, each row is going to be one stitch longer than the last. So here on the first right side row, I'm going to knit to one stitch after the first marker. So here's my marker dangling down between the two stitches, and I'm going to go to one stitch after that marker. So now we're going to start closing up the gap that is going to form here on the sides of the heel. And to do that, all I'm going to do is take my marker and I'm going to lift this strand up onto my onto my left needle. And you want the right leg of the strand to be at the front of your needle and the left at the back. So just go right on through. And then you can remove your stitch marker and take it off. And now to make sure that there's no hole formed right there, we're just going to knit the lifted strand together with the next stitch. Now turn your work over, and on the first wrong side row, you're going to purl across until you get to one stitch after the next marker. So here's the marker dangling down between the two stitches, and I'm going to go to one stitch after that marker. And on the wrong side, we do things just a little bit different. The first thing we're going to do is slip one stitch from left to right. And now we need to lift up the marker. And again, we're going to take this lifted strand and we're going to put it on our left needle so that the right side of the strand is coming over the front of the needle and the left side of the strand is at the back. So just go right through the stitch. And then you can take the marker off of the stitch. And then we're going to return this slipped stitch back to the left needle. And then just purl those two stitches together. And turn your work. So the remaining heel rows are all pretty similar. On the right side, you're going to knit to the gap, and then we'll use the marker to lift the strand and knit 2 stitches together. So I'm going to knit to the gap. And you can see here where the gap is, there's a pretty sizable space in between these 2 stitches. So I've reached the gap. I'm going to use the marker to lift this strand up onto my needle with the right leg of the strand at the front, the left leg at the back. Remove the marker. And then I'm going to knit the lifted strand together with the next stitch. Turn the work over. And you can see there's the gap. So I'm going to purl across to the gap. And on the purl side, you also have to slip 1 stitch first, then take the next marker and lift up that strand, right leg at the front, left leg at the back, put it on your left needle, remove the marker, return the slipped stitch, and then purl the stitch and the lifted strand together. And turn. Knit to the gap. Lift the strand. Right leg at the front, left at the back. Slip it onto your left needle and remove the marker. And knit 2 together. Turn. Purl to the gap. Slip 1. Lift the strand. Right leg to the front of the needle, left leg to the back. Remove the marker. Return the stitch and purl 2 together. And you just continue on until 1 marker remains on each side of the sock heel. When you get to the point that only 1 marker is remaining on each side, it's time to stop knitting in rows and start knitting in the round again. So we're going to start knitting in the round, and just like before, we're going to knit all the way across until we get to the gap. And when we get to the gap, we do the same thing. We lift the marker, slip it onto our needle, right leg at the front, left at the back, and remove the marker. And then knit those 2 stitches together. But now, instead of turning to go the other way across the heel, we're going to continue and we're going to work in our pattern across the instep stitches. So now we still have that one last gap and pin to close up here. So to close that last gap, all you do is lift the strand, lift it up onto your left needle. Again, the right leg is at the front and the left at the back. Remove the pin. And then knit those 2 stitches together. All the pins have been removed, all the gaps are closed, and your heel has been shaped. So now just continue knitting your sock in rounds. I hope you enjoyed learning how to knit a Japanese or pinned short row heel. And if you did, make sure to like this video. Also, I'd love to know your favorite heel shaping technique. You can tell me in the comments below. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!